Why are children still dying in Gaza? Why did Israel attack Iran? Why has the Middle East been unable to stop fighting for more than 100 years? To answer these questions, we have to go back more than 2,000 years. This is not a story about religion. It is not a story about politics. This is the story of one people, persecuted for over 2 millennia, and what that persecution ultimately unleashed upon the world. You cannot understand the present without knowing this history. Who are the Jewish people? Can you answer that question accurately? Around 1800 BCE, a man named Abraham led his family to the land of Canaan, the territory we know today as Israel and Palestine. That is where the story of the Jewish people begins. What set them apart was a belief that, at the time, was radical beyond imagination. There is only one God. While Egypt, Babylon, and Rome worshipped countless gods, the Jewish people stood alone in their monotheism. That difference planted the very first seed of the hatred that would follow them for centuries. The Jewish people are also unique in another way. They are simultaneously an ethnicity and a religion, a combination unlike any other group on earth. Enslaved in Egypt, exiled to Babylon, their temple destroyed by Rome. Again and again, they lost their homeland, and yet they never disappeared. That refusal to vanish would eventually become a source of fear, suspicion, and hatred. In the year 70 CE, Rome destroyed Jerusalem. The Jewish people were scattered across the world. This is known as the diaspora, the Great Dispersal. And from that moment, a pattern of prejudice was born. After Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire in the 4th century, Jews were branded with a charge that had no basis in truth, that they were collectively responsible for the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. This was not coincidence. Whenever a majority seeks to dominate a minority, it always needs a scapegoat. Everywhere they went, Jews were outsiders. They preserved their own culture, their own faith, their own identity, refusing to assimilate. And for that, century after century, they were made into a convenient enemy. From here, the story descends into the darkness of medieval Europe. Did you know this? In medieval Europe, Jews were forbidden from owning land, farming, or joining trade guilds. The range of work available to them was extraordinarily narrow. One of the only professions left open to them was finance. Christians were prohibited from lending money at interest. Jews were not. But in a bitter irony, this created a new layer of prejudice. The myth spread, Jews are obsessed with money. And medieval Europe went further, pushing crueler lies. Jews used the blood of Christian children in religious rituals. Jews spread the Black Death. This was not coincidence. When people are gripped by fear and rage, they almost always turn on the most vulnerable outsiders in their midst. The Crusades, the Spanish Inquisition, a cascade of expulsions from country to country. Expelled from England in 1290, from France in 1306. A people persecuted wherever they go. That was the reality of Jewish life in the Middle Ages. In the 18th century, the French Revolution brought what seemed like liberation for Jewish people. For the first time, they were granted equal citizenship. But this progress triggered a fierce new backlash. Fear spread that Jews were now entering society and gaining influence. A new form of antisemitism emerged in the 19th century. This time, it was racial. Jews were no longer seen as merely a religious group that could earn acceptance through conversion. Now they were declared a separate, inferior race, dangerous by blood. In 1903, the Russian secret police forged a document and released it to the world. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, a fabricated text claiming that Jewish leaders were secretly conspiring to dominate the world. Every word of it was a lie. This was not coincidence. The forgery was translated into dozens of languages and eventually found its way into the hands of Adolf Hitler. In Russia, waves of pogroms, organized massacres of Jews, forced hundreds of thousands to flee as refugees. And it was then that one man made a decision. The Jewish people must have a homeland of their own. Theodor Herzl. An Austrian Jewish journalist, he witnessed the Dreyfus Affair in France in 1894. Even in France, the nation that had proclaimed liberty, equality, and fraternity, an innocent Jewish military officer was convicted of treason for no reason other than being Jewish. Herzl was shattered. No matter how much we assimilate, we will always be persecuted as Jews. We have no choice but to build our own nation. This was the birth of Zionism, the movement to establish a Jewish homeland. Why Palestine? Because it was the promised land of the Hebrew Bible, the land that Jewish people had dreamed of returning to in their prayers for 2,000 years. In 1917, Britain issued the Balfour Declaration, officially supporting the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. But at the same time, Britain had also promised the Arab people an independent state in that very same land. One land, two peoples, two promises. This double dealing, what history calls Britain's dual promise, became the direct cause of a tragedy that has never stopped unfolding. 1933. Adolf Hitler seized power in Germany. World War I had ended in humiliating defeat. Inflation had obliterated the savings of ordinary Germans. The Great Depression had shattered what remained. Into that despair, Hitler offered the German people an enemy. The cause of all your suffering is the Jews. Beginning in 1933, a systematic stripping of rights began. Jobs taken, property seized, freedom of movement eliminated. Jews were forced to sew a yellow star onto their clothing, marking them as subhuman in the eyes of the state. November 9th, 1938. Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. Across Germany, Jewish shops, homes, and synagogues were smashed and set ablaze. With every pane of shattered glass, another life was pushed to the edge of destruction. Then, in 1941, the Nazis launched what they called the final solution, Auschwitz. Built on Polish soil, this camp became the destination for Jewish people transported from across Europe. The moment they stepped off the trains, a selection was made. To the right, forced labor. To the left, the gas chamber. At Auschwitz alone, approximately 1.1 million people were killed. The vast majority were Jewish. In the 6 years between 1939 and 1945, the Nazis murdered 6 million Jewish people across Europe. 2/3 of all the Jews on the European continent gone from this earth. 6 million. Take a moment with that number. Every single one of them had a name, a family, a future, a life they were still living. This was not coincidence. This was a genocide planned by a government, executed by bureaucrats, and carried out on trains run by a national railway. Industrial, systematic, deliberate. Holocaust survivors would later speak these words. The world knew, and the world did nothing. Those words changed the course of history. 1945. The war was over. The survivors of the 6 million, those who had lived through the unimaginable, stood in the ashes of a shattered world. There is no going back to Europe. The survivors turned toward Palestine. In 1947, the United Nations voted to partition Palestine into a Jewish state and an Arab state. The Jewish leadership accepted the plan. The Arab world rejected it. May 14, 1948. David Ben-Gurion declared the independence of the State of Israel. The United States recognized it the same day. Why did America move so swiftly? Humanitarian sympathy for Holocaust survivors, strategic interests in the Middle East during the early Cold War. Multiple factors were at play. But historians also point to the powerful lobbying efforts of Jewish American organizations as a significant force behind the speed of that recognition. The following day, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon invaded. Israelis call what followed the War of Independence. Palestinians call it the Nakba, the catastrophe. Israel won the war, and more than 700,000 Palestinians were driven from their homes. Here lies the core of what may be the most intractable conflict on earth. the right of a people persecuted for 2,000 years to exist in safety, and the right of a people who had lived on that land for generations to return to it, colliding head-on over the same ground. From the moment Israel was founded, the wars did not stop. 1956, 1967, 1973. The Arab-Israeli wars came in waves. The most consequential was the Six-Day War of 1967. In just 6 days, Israel seized the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, the Golan Heights, and gained full control of Jerusalem. That occupation is the direct cause of the Gaza crisis today. This was not coincidence. In 1993, the Oslo Accords offered a glimpse of hope. But in 2007, Hamas, an Islamist organization that refuses to recognize Israel's right to exist, seized control of Gaza. And from that moment, the story connects directly to the world we live in now. 2,000 years of persecution, the despair of the Holocaust, the choice to build a nation, the loss experienced by the Palestinian people, the unending chain of wars. Without this single, unbroken line of history, you cannot understand the invasion of Gaza or the strikes on Iran. Understand the Jewish story, and you understand why Israel reacts with such intensity to any threat to its existence. Understand the Palestinian story, and you understand why that resistance has never been extinguished. Neither side is simply right. Neither side is simply wrong. This is not a question of good and evil. It is a question of history, and of what history makes inevitable. That understanding is the only place where clarity about the modern Middle East can begin. The story continues. Why did Israel invade Gaza in 2023? Why did the United States and Israel strike Iran in 2026? The answers are in the next video.